Good morning, Collective Church. I am so excited to be here today and to talk about this. If you don't know anything about me, this is my favorite topic, relationships and human connection. And I am so glad to be here. I do feel it feels like nervousness today. And not because of I'm nervous about the public speaking aspect. This message is so important. Aside from following the Lord and giving your life to Him, this marriage and our relationships with other humans is the biggest determining factor of the path that our life walks. And there are ways to do it well, and there are ways that can make it very painful. Listening to this opening song, talking about how we serve the God who raises the dead, that applies to our relationships, because if you're in a dead relationship right now, and you know the King who, when He shows up, He raises things from the dead, I hope that speaks hope to you today. Everything I have to say, I want it to be an encouragement. None of this is to condemn you for anything you're experiencing right now, because I believe that if you're walking in pain, even if you're the one causing it, there is a reason you're walking in that pain. And the good news is we know the guy who makes all things new. Okay? You might have heard marriage talked about 100 times if you've grown up in the church. So my hope today is that I can give you a little different perspective, because my background is a little bit different. So I want to come at this from a different angle. A few years ago, I went and did a little bit of a job change and started getting trained in Splunk therapy. So I work with people in a therapeutic setting, addressing the part of our brain, it's called our limbic system. It's the deep layers of our brain that operate most, by far, of what we do. Some people refer to this as the subconscious part of your brain. Its job is to keep you safe and to remember everything you've ever been through and try to warn you from any of those things ever happening again. And it does a very thorough job at it, but sometimes it gets us stuck. So I work in that capacity. I, in that, have studied the science of connecting, the science of how we show up in life. A few years ago, I started a TikTok channel strictly talking about healthy human connection and emotional intelligence. And that was a few years ago. So in order to get more and more content for that, I had to read more and more books. And I have kind of taken my nerdiness in this subject and gone deep with it and brought it into what I talk about. And then a year ago, I started a podcast specifically talking about this stuff. So neuroscience, subconscious, emotional intelligence, that's what we're bringing to the topic of marriage today. I recognize for as many faces that are in this room, there's that many different kind of scenarios. We have single people, we have married people, we have happily married people, we have people stuck in painful marriages, we have divorced people, people on there's maybe second marriage, third marriage, and I just want you to know, I wish I could address all of those. It's a short amount of time, so I know the Holy Spirit has something for you today, no matter what your story and background is. All right, I have been married for 15 years to my husband Mason here, and thank you. You know the love story. We met in college, thanks to my mom. She's very proud of that. So we met in college, and it was the love story of all love stories. I thought nobody had ever been in love like my husband and I before. Like, we had just unlocked something that no one else had ever experienced. I would spend hours reading my studying for nursing tests in the stinky practice rooms of his music performance degree college rooms. And we were in love. We would stay up all night talking about our futures and our dreams and finding more out about each other, and it was just a dream. And then that dream led us to get married. We moved to Colorado, and it was just like, man, how did we get so lucky? But then we had to be like real live adults. We had to get jobs. We had to pay bills. We started having kids, which is a lifelong dream of ours, the best part of our life. But our apathy towards each other crept in because our intentionality towards all the other stuff took over. And it happened slowly over time. Our late nights of discovering each other and talking about what makes us excited and what hurts our feelings and how to connect better turned into a Netflix episode and an early bedtime. because the baby's going to be up in 2 hours, right? And you're like, it's fine. It's just for a season. Well, that season was years. And it was, here, you do dinner, I'll do the diapers. You do bath time, I'll clean up the kitchen. What time do we have to be at your mom's? Don't forget to bring this to the school tomorrow. Let's spend Saturday, we got to get the house clean. We haven't cleaned this. We became taskmasters of our own lives and our own house. And although he worked from home and we spoke all day, every day, we never said anything to each other. For a long time, nothing of substance at least, not that inner stuff, the stuff of like, here's who I am, how I'm doing. And the reality was, years had gone by. I was not the same person as I was in college. I had evolved to a mom. I am a new person. He was a new person, but we didn't take the time to get to meet that new person. So all of a sudden, we found ourselves in a place that felt very lonely, very scary, and not really knowing how to get out of it. Those conversations that we used to have when we were in college felt very awkward and like we had forgotten how to do them. And it was almost like we were trying to be, at least for me, go back to what we had in college. What I didn't realize is we had to do something new. We had to create a new relationship because we were new people now. So we were ready to do that. Thankfully, he was in it with me. Both of us were ready to scrap the marriage that we were currently in and build something new together. That looked like going to counseling. That looked like reading a lot of books. That looked like practicing connecting with each other, even though it felt cheesy and awkward and like, ugh, and I just want to go to bed, right? It was work. And I remember Mason talking to one of his friends about this, who was also struggling in his marriage at the time with loneliness and disconnection. And the guy said, nah, marriage isn't work. It should just come naturally. You shouldn't have to work at it. If you have to work at it, you must be married to the wrong person. And he said, look at us. We're buddies. We're friends. We don't have to work on our friendship. And Mason said, I talk to you twice a week. I guarantee you that if we were living in the same house doing all of life, every layer of it together, we would have some stuff to work through. Because relationships take effort, but the effort is so, so worth it. Today, I want to tell you what a godly marriage is in case you have never seen one. Maybe you grew up and it was not a godly marriage that was in your home. And I want to paint that picture for you because I want you to hear the Holy Spirit say, this is what I have for you. This was my original design for marriage. And then I want to talk about some of the biggest landmines that take those things over and kind of kill that original design for marriage that God has for us. All right, so perfect world scenario. This is talking to the men. The Bible does have some stuff to say about how men show up in a specifically marriage setting. And Ephesians 5:23 says, men are called to love their bride like Christ loves the church. That is a high calling. Like someday, men, the words you speak, the tone of voice you use, the eye contact, the body language, the time you give to your wife, you're going to stand before your Creator and He's going to ask you, how did you steward this relationship that I gave you? And the standard you're going to be held to is Christ. It is a high, high calling. And it says that we are called to love, you're called to love like Christ. Well, Christ laid down his life for his church. He put his everything aside and laid his life down for our benefit so that we would thrive, so that we would have freedom, so that we would have identity and authority. Okay? The Bible also says that you are the head of the home and the head of the relationship. This is not talking about, I'm the boss. You got to do what I say when I say it because I'm the leader. That has a different term. That's called toxic masculinity in this day and age. This kind of leadership is different than the world portrays. If the world says leadership is flex, make your voice loud, be decisive and strong and hard, but the Bible says The kingdom we're in is an upside down kingdom. It works the very opposite of how the world works. And it says that when Christ came, he was our servant. The Bible actually says in Matthew 20, it says, whoever will be great among you shall be your servant. So if you're the husband in this home and you are laying your life down so that your wife can flourish, so that you're creating space for her to have identity and authority, and you are serving her with your time and your energy and your conversation, you are like the fertilizer that helps her grow. And then you do the same thing for your kids. You become this platform, this foundation for your family on which everybody stands. And it's a beautiful scenario. And families flourish like this. Men, you are strong. You are resilient, and you are natural leaders because God designed you that way. When your leadership is under this umbrella of servanthood, it changes your family, it changes our city, it changes our nation. Imagine if our whole nation was filled with men who are looking to God, accountable to him, and then coming in service with all that strength and leadership to their family. The other thing about this, men, is that means you're the leader, you go first. So if your marriage is struggling, if your wife is feeling disconnected, sad, lonely, if you're feeling stuck, this isn't working, and you're at a standstill. Wife doesn't want to say sorry, you don't want to say sorry. Wife doesn't want to do anything different, you got to go first because you're the leader. Christ is looking to you to go first, be brave. Show your family what it means to humble yourself and to walk out kindness and love even when it feels like you're putting your own desires and pride to the side. Okay? Women, we have our own mandate in the Bible. Ephesians 5 says, women, submit to your husbands. And in Genesis, it says that we were created to be his helpmate. Now, this is his helpmate, not the shove him to the side and do it for him, not the nag him until he does it, not the criticize him until he gets it right. We are to be his helper, like the person who, like he was fertilizer for us to grow and be the best version of ourselves. We come alongside him and say, hey, what do you need? We remind him of his identity. We remind him of his authority in Christ, who he is. We're praying for him. We're encouraging him. We're reminding him who he is when he can't even remember himself. Like you're becoming his person, his safe place, so that when he goes out and does whatever it is that he's doing, he knows that when he comes home, he's got you. And the words that you speak with your mouth are so important. There's a quote that I heard that has always stuck with me, and it says, every man has two men inside of him, a fool and a king. And the one that you speak to is the one that will emerge. Because women have this innate ability to create life. We create life with our bodies. We create life with our words. And when you call out that kind of identity in the man that God has given you, that king emerges. It's like you have the power to tell him who he is. That is a big, big calling. Men are strong and they are assertive, but they need someone by their side reminding them of who they are when they don't remember it for themselves. When you are out in public, when you are at home in private, use your words to show honor and respect to the man that God gave you. Okay, so another quote for you here. And I'm going to switch gears because this is one of my most important points I want to tell you guys. This is a game changer, life changer, and applies to every relationship you have, not just marriage. Intimacy, so closeness, the ability to feel connected with someone, like they're your ride or die, it will inevitably bring conflict, right? But conflict does not always bring intimacy, even though it's the biggest opportunity for human connection. Okay? So conflict is because you're a human, number one way to connect with somebody because it involves emotions. And like it or not, it'd be easier if it wasn't this way, but emotions are the number one way in which humans connect. You have to have some sort of an emotional something going on. I'm not talking about emotional outbursts. I'm not talking about screaming and crying. I'm talking about heart connection. You have to have that to be able to connect with someone, okay? So I'm going to tell you why conflict is your best fertile ground for connection. But first, I'm going to tell you about the Gottmans, okay? Dr. John Gottman and his wife, I've got a book of theirs here that I'm going to hand out at the end of this. They are like the kings and queens of relationships. They've given their entire lives to studying the science of human connection. If any of this intrigues you, get on their website. You'll get lost for hours. It's such good stuff, and it's all research-based. So they did this study that they're famous for. They took thousands of couples, and they watched them over 2 decades. And what they were watching for is how they handled conflict, okay? It's inevitable, right? It's going to come up. At the end of this study, they were able to predict within 93.6% accuracy which couples were going to end up separating and which couples were going to stay married based off of this tell. There's a tell. And Dr. John Gottman says, if this is present, if these are present in your relationship, you're not on a good trajectory, okay? And what he was looking for is a series of connecting behaviors or disconnecting behaviors in conflict, okay? So when you are in conflict, someone's feeling triggered, there's an opportunity for emotion at the surface. You can have an opportunity to either connect or disconnect with your spouse, with your partner at the time, okay? The couples who showed 5 connecting behaviors for every 1 disconnecting behavior, he put them in the category of super connectors. They were the people that 20 years from now, they're going to be happily married with their ride or die, weathered the storm, got through all life through at them, and happy they did it because they showed this kind of honor and respect for each other even when tension was high, okay? The couples who showed far more disconnecting behaviors, they were the ones that he could predict within 93% accuracy that relationship was not going to make it, okay? And of these, and I'm going to move on to another slide, so if you'd like, go ahead and take a picture of this. If that's helpful for you. But of those disconnecting behaviors, he identified 4 that were the most deadly to relationships. And so he decided to give them the most dramatic name possible, in my opinion. He called them the 4 henchmen of the apocalypse. The apocalypse meaning the end, okay? These were criticism, stating your complaint about a scenario as a defect in your partner's personality. This would look like, you always talk about yourself, you're so selfish. Defect in your personality. Anything critical, criticizing your behavior, criticizing your intent, criticizing you as a person, criticizing your laziness. It's a weed that will grow rampant if let loose. The next one is contempt, and he says this one is the most dangerous of all of them. And it's basically just approaching your significant other, your spouse, as if you are better than them. It's this attitude of, I cannot believe you would do that. What is wrong with you? You are such an idiot. That name calling, that I am up here and you are down here. Okay? Defensiveness is the next one. Defensiveness in conflict is when something in you perceives that someone is trying to attack you. And your instinct is to protect yourself. So I'm going to take everything you say and I'm going to shove it right back at you. I'm going to fight back. I am going to deflect everything that is said to me. I can't hear any kind of constructive feedback because I am protecting myself right now. And then the last one, stonewalling. I was the queen of stonewalling. I just shut everything down. Oh, we're in a conflict? No problem, because this has no effect on me. You can't talk to me. I have nothing to say about this. I'm fine. I am great. Nothing ever hurts my feelings, and I never get mad about anything, so leave me alone. Right? I hope that sounds familiar to anyone else other than just me. I had to learn how to undo that training, and that was very, very difficult. So I want you to look at this and not be discouraged. I told you, I'm not telling you anything today because I want you to feel guilty. I want you to be encouraged. There's a guy out there that spent his entire life dedicating his whole career to figuring out the 4 deadliest things for relationships so that we don't have to. All we have to do is believe him. All we have to do is take all of our energy, arm in arm with our spouse, and say, no matter what, we are getting rid of these 4 things. 0 tolerance. And when we mess up, which we will, because we're learning how to do marriage differently, we are committed to just apologizing every single time. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing the stonewalling thing again. Okay, give me 20 minutes. I need to gather my thoughts. I need to cool down. Come back in 20 minutes and let's talk about this, right? We're learning new skills. I want you to be encouraged that somebody identified these. And it's okay if they're in your relationship now because you know the God who teaches you how to do new things. You know the God who raises things from the dead and creates newness in us, okay? All right, so let's get to why is conflict fertile ground? Because most of us, if I was going to poll you, you'd probably say, no, it's the exact opposite. Conflict is terrible. It's lonely and frustrating. I avoid it at all costs, and I hate it. And I get it. I think the rest of the world would agree with you. But what John Gottman says in his book here, Fight Right, how successful couples turn conflict into connection. Okay, so imagine this. I want you to totally change how you see conflict. That's my goal, okay? On a random Tuesday morning when you're at home with your spouse and everybody's just getting ready for work or getting the kids out the door to school and you're in task mode, there's no deep potential for connection right there because we're just doing life. All the things, all the emotions, they're kind of tucked down deep somewhere. And you can be kind and it's great, but it's not the fertile ground for deep connection. But let's say we're in conflict. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling nervous, anything. And my emotions come to the surface, which we don't always get to choose when that happens, right? Sometimes they just come up to the surface. Here is an opportunity for my spouse now. I could bring this fear, this frustration to my spouse, and he could notice it as an opportunity to connect, and he could just shower me with all those connecting behaviors that was on that list. Imagine if I came to my spouse and I said, oh, I'm feeling just so nervous about this thing. I can't settle down. It's making me doubt everything, and I share and I pour my heart out. I get I get up the nerve to share something very vulnerable with him. And imagine if he met me with, wow, I had no idea you were feeling that way. Thank you for telling me because I had no idea. Imagine if he came and sat down next to me and he put his phone away and just listened and didn't interrupt. And then I explained more and he's like, so are you saying this? He's actively listening. There's this pressure release valve in me when Mason does that for me that I'm like, oh, okay, I got that off my chest. And somebody sat in the yuck with it with me. And I felt safe in that moment. Because on top of that safety, you do that enough times, you start to build trust in your marriage again. And then you do that enough times, you start to build up that friendship side of marriage again. Because what Mason and I lost in those early years was our friendship. We were just not connecting with each other in a way that was meaningful, in a way that was strong enough to tie us together. Now imagine if I got up the guts to say something super vulnerable to my spouse, and I was met with, oh, not again. You do this once a month, we have to have this conversation. Or he rolls his eyes, or he keeps scrolling on his phone, never even acknowledges that I'm talking. That does the very opposite. It creates a feeling of not feeling safe and withdraw and okay, I will learn not to bring myself, my inner world, anything real. I'm learning not to bring that to you. When you paint it like that, you can see why these two columns are so important in the study that the Gottmans did and why they are one of the biggest determining factors if a marriage lasts or not. And I will tell you, learning to do marriage with connecting behaviors, honoring your spouse, being there for them, understanding, laying yourself down so you can hear their pain, you can respond to it compassionately. All of this is hard work, but it will become more natural for you the more you do it. And if you had to look at these two columns again, and if you had to guess, which one do you think lines up with the voice of the Lord? And which one do you think lines up with the voice of the enemy? God gave us free will. We get to do marriage however we want to. We get to show up selfishly or selflessly. We get to be ruled by our anger, or we get to learn grace and compassion. God will not force you to be this kind of a spouse. But I'm telling you what, it is also for your own benefit that you learn to become that kind of a spouse. Because in marriage, God has a deep, meaningful friendship and connection for you, and you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it if you're stuck in the disconnecting, trying to protect myself, trying to make myself more powerful than you, trying to make sure you don't hurt me. It feels safer to be in that column, but it's a lie. It's isolating and it's lonely, and it will only end in more pain. God's way is go straight through it. And yes, I understand that this often takes both the husband and the wife who are willing to obey Christ in their marriage. When one person is on board and the other person is not interested in obeying Christ in their marriage, this dynamic gets tricky. But I want, like I said, to paint you the ideal so that you can see what God is capable of bringing into a marriage when both people submit to him, give their lives to him, and do marriage his way. Okay? When we talk about successful conflict, I'm going to touch on this just briefly. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, "Let all you do be done in love." That could be the end of my sermon right there. If you applied that verse to everything you do, every conflict you have with your spouse, the way you greet them in the morning, the way you come home after work, the words you speak about them when they're not around, if you just applied that verse, that's it. 90% of marriage issues would probably clear up, right? But it's the nitty-gritty, the how. How do we do everything in love? That's the part that takes some learning and some education. So number one, if you feel a conflict coming, like you can feel the storm brewing, and you gear up to win, I'm going to win this one. I'm going to finally tell them how I feel. I am going to make sure they know that I'm not going to stand for this anymore. I'm going to win. You've already lost. Because you're approaching you're missing the whole thing of conflict being a point of connection, okay? Instead, I want you to seek to understand. Okay, the conflict is brewing, the emotions are up at the surface. I am going to try to understand why you're so upset. Where are you coming from? Because I'm not understanding. Could you say that in a different way? What I'm hearing you say is this. Is that right? Oh, wow, I had no idea. John Gottman says that when he talks to his wife in these scenarios, he says, I have a legal pad that I get out, and I notes, and I don't interrupt. And I learn about her. I learn that the thing that I was doing that I thought was blessing her is actually driving her insane, and she hates it. And if I would have never listened to her, I would have never learned that about her. He takes time to write his notes on legal paper. Second one is just honor God in how you speak. The words that come out of your mouth are powerful. If I'm the one expressing a grievance to my spouse, I am responsible for saying it kindly, respectfully, in a way that focuses on my experience and not blames you. I feel lonely when this happens. I feel disrespected when this happens. Instead of you always, right? Submit your tongue to the Lord. Take a breather before you get your heart in a good spot before you bring a grievance to your spouse. Be respectful. You'll be held accountable to it when you stand before the Lord someday. When someone brings a grievance to you, watch your tongue. Get your heart right with the Lord. Check in with Jesus before you respond. You're going to be held accountable for your response to someone when they bring a grievance to you. And then finally, be careful not to let your emotions dictate your actions, okay? If you have spent any time around a toddler, you know they have an emotion, they feel an emotion, it dictates their actions right there in the middle of the grocery store, right? They don't have a filter, they don't have a delay, they don't have an ability to pause and choose something different, and that's developmentally appropriate. But part of growing up and getting out of that childhood behavior is learning to have an emotion, recognize it. Oh, I'm feeling heated right now. My heart is pounding. My fists are sweaty and clenched. I am feeling some feelings. But pausing, creating space, and then choosing. Choosing how to respond to this person. I may feel like stonewalling because I am mad and I don't want to talk about it. And I want to shut you out because I want to punish you for how you've treated me, and I want my silence to feel awkward to you. But I am choosing to give myself a 10-minute breather and to come back and talk about this. I might feel like everything you're saying is ridiculous and it's a waste of time, and there's no point in me listening to it. But I'm going to choose because I am growing up. I am an adult who is learning to handle my emotions better. I'm going to choose to try harder to understand what it is that you're saying and where some of this anger is coming from and what it is you're truly trying to get across to me. Now, all of this is easier said than done, right? I just painted a lot of really perfect world scenarios for you. Sounds really great. But then you get your own emotions stirred up. And you open your mouth, and those 4 henchmen come roaring out. And you're like, whoa, I didn't even know I was going to do that or say that. Like the red lights come on, right? And you just get triggered. And I want to tell you something about this. This is more where we're talking about the neuroscience side of this. There is a reason that you do that, and it's not because you're a horrible person. You are not a horrible person. You have this part of your brain that is wired to operate in a certain way. And a lot of it comes from maybe how you were raised. Things that were spoken over you as a kid, the dynamic of your being able to have any kind of emotions when you were a kid with your parents. A pain that you experienced with a breakup in college. Your brain registers those as like red flag. This thing, emotions, relationships, dangerous. So we just build all the walls up, right? We protect ourselves. We get defensive because we're trying to stay safe. And the thing that maybe kept you safe as a kid is now keeping you stuck as an adult. Okay? I'm going to give you a small example of this. Susie Q, okay? She had a dad who just wasn't around much. And when he was, he'd come home, he'd sit on the couch, and he'd watch TV for 5-6 hours until the night was over, and he'd go to bed. Wasn't really interested in her or what was going on with her life. And eventually, when she was 10, he just up and left altogether, okay? Now she's married, got her own husband, got her own kids, her own life, great marriage, great husband. But occasionally, he comes home from work, and he sits on the couch for 10 or 15 minutes before dinner starts. And every alarm in her nervous system starts going off. She freaks out. You don't even care about our family. Look at you just sitting on the couch there while I'm slaving over dinner. You don't even care how hard I've worked today. And this is like a side of his wife he is not used to seeing. But it happens every time. And I guarantee you she doesn't know why it makes her so upset. But something has registered in her. This visual of a man sitting on a couch equals a man who does not care about me, is emotionally checked out, and one day is going to leave me. Now, that's a very specific example, but I promise you, if you have any kind of story in your life like that has been unresolved, that is still seeping into our relationships today, okay? If you had temper tantrums as a kid and you were spanked for them, sent to your room, punished for having emotions, you very likely learned, I will just not have those emotions, and it solves all the problems. I don't get in trouble. My parents don't reject me, yell at me, embarrass me, send me away. So I won't be sad anymore. I won't be scared. I won't be upset. And and I'll lock it all down. Well, now you're married and your wife is sitting there, your husband's sitting there saying, tell me all the feelings. And you're like, There's something deep in you saying, I'm not doing that. That unhealed stuff, as much as I wish it wasn't true and as much as it's hard to believe, it is affecting the way we show up in our relationships today. But the good news is, we know who the healer is. We know the guy who brings healing to our past, okay? There's a video that I'm going to show you in a little bit. And I don't anticipate that you guys are going to cry when you see it, but I will be honest and tell you I did. And it's a very scientific video, so the reason for tears does not make any sense, besides I am a nerd about this kind of stuff. But it is powerful, because what I'm going to show you is a video of two brain cells connecting for the first time. It's essentially a video of someone learning something new. It's essentially a video of God renewing our mind. He created us to have something that the science world calls neurogenesis, the ability to make completely brand new brain cells, and neuroplasticity, which means even if your childhood was riddled with pain and distance and emotional disconnection, and you've marked red flags on all of that, God has given our bodies the innate ability to renew our mind. Yes, and our mind is the place where all these messages are speaking to us. All the things that you don't even know are in the background. I am worthless. No one's going to stick around for me. Connecting with humans isn't safe. My feelings are not valid. This person is dangerous. All of those programs you have running in the depths of your brain will override your conscious part of your brain until there is healing brought into those places. So we got to let the healer in. God is faithful to renew our minds, but we got to show up to the counseling session with him, right? And this might actually mean you finally go to counseling for a season. It might mean that you get with a trusted Christian mentor or friend and you're like, hey, I've got stuff to process. I've never talked about what happened in my childhood. I have never acknowledged that the way that I'm acting might be because I'm trying to protect myself and I have pain that I wish wasn't there, but it's been 3 decades and it's still there and it's not going away anytime soon. But I will also tell you, this is why getting in your word is so important. God doesn't say get in your word because he just wants more rules for you to follow. He knows that the deep parts of your brain that are still feeling like that little child dismissed and discouraged and shamed and punished when you were a kid for just having emotions or whatever it was, he knows that when you get in your word and you read, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am worth not only fighting for, not only sticking around for, I'm worth dying for. Like the King of Heaven, if it was just me on this planet, he would have came and died just for me. And you read this stuff, this truth, this shame that's been keeping you down for so long, and all of a sudden you read, there's no condemnation in Christ. Like he gets rid of all of it. I'm not condemned. And you start to think a new thought. And not just in the conscious layers of your brain. The subconscious part of your brain starts to rewire itself. It undoes the pain and the hurt from what was spoken and done over you before. You begin to believe God, which means you have to stop believing the other voices. And it changes the depths of your brain in such a tangible way that I can show you a video of it. Because we serve a God who makes all things new. And we are created in his likeness, which means we can make all things new. We can make our marriage new. We can lay down our pride, serve each other in the way that Christ serves us. We can force our words to submit to Christ and not let anything come out of our mouth that is critical or full of contempt or defensiveness. And when we do, we apologize because we're doing life differently now. We don't do marriage the same way as the world does. So I'm going to have you guys watch this video here. 2 brain cells thinking a new thought. a new pathway for this thought to be formed. The brain needs a pathway in order for a thought to be thought. Imagine this is the thought of, I am worth sticking around for. I'm worth fighting for. I am not held down by shame anymore. And like how hard the body works to fight for us. Like those things look like they have a mind of their own, and they are working hard to find each other and to connect in this new thought. And then the other cool thing is, in this science part of creating new thoughts, this thought, I'm worth fighting for. I don't have to carry shame anymore because Christ washed it away. It's this flimsy little connection in your brain, and it's brand new. But the more you think it, meaning the more you open your word, the more you meet with Jesus in worship, the more you let him speak over you, and you think that thought over and over and over again, that thought becomes literally thicker, faster for that electrical impulse to travel across, and your mind is literally in the process of being made new. Romans 12:2, my favorite verse over the last few years. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And don't you love when science matches up with what God has been telling us for thousands of years? The other cool thing is, the more you think that thought and the faster and thicker that thought process gets, your brain is so efficient. It will recognize that these other pathways, they're just taking up room now. We don't use them that often. The I'm worthless, I deserve bad things to happen to me, I am shameful, I deserve people to walk away. We don't use those thoughts anymore. So the brain will start to shrivel them up. And eventually they can disappear altogether. And your most natural state is, I am a child of God. I deserve to be treated well. The pain that I feel deserves to be heard. I can say it. And I deserve it to be met with compassion. I don't carry shame around anymore because I've been forgiven by Christ. So I just leave you with this. Let Christ come in. Let him heal. Let him renew your mind. Your spouse is a gift from God. When both of you are under the submission of Christ and willing to serve each other in this way, God will use your spouse to not only bring you a friend, a person to do life with, but also to sanctify you, to teach you things about him that you haven't learned yet. Because when marriage gets hard, and it does sometimes, you learn to dig deeper into Christ. You learn to draw from his love instead of your own. And it's worth the work. So I'm going to have Pastor Drew come up and just pray over us. And then I'm not going to do it publicly, but at the end, I've got 3 marriage books up here that I read in my season of learning a lot of the stuff that I'd love to hand out. So whoever wants to come up to me and grab those afterwards would be great.